Welcome to the With Winning in Mind podcast. I'm Heather Sumlin along with my brother Troy Basham, and today we are interviewing Kellie Hall Sbrocchi. Kellie was a client of mine back in 2019, and she was able to use the mental management system as well as some interview tips and tricks that we worked on in order to land her at first runner-up to Miss California. But she's much more than a runner-up to Miss California. She is a naval officer. She's a podcaster. She is a professional model and photographer, and she gets it all done and with style. So she's going to talk to us about how she prioritizes her time, what she took away from the mental management program, and more. Kellie, welcome. So tell us a little bit about your backstory, a little bit about you.
Oh my goodness. This is always the hardest question for me just because I don't know how long or short to make it. But bottom line, full-time naval officer. I have been in the Navy all my life. I'm a Navy brat as well. But that's just what I do. I think who I am. I'm a very multi-passionate person. I have my own podcast, Misunderstood Podcast. Kind of turned into an influencer and content creator over the last 4 years. Didn't intend to start that. Here I am doing that as well. I'm a newlywed, just married here in April. And then I am a licensed business owner and photographer and professional model. So I definitely always have a full calendar. But why my connection with you is I was a former Miss California USA runner-up. I didn't win, but I did prep for Miss California USA, and I competed in the Miss USA system for 4 years. So it's been a minute since I was in that world, but it definitely kind of helped make me who I am today.
If you could go back and relive one moment from your life, what would it be?
That's a harder question. I think so. Would I relive it, like knowing what's about to happen?
Oh, it's your
or
question.
would I, you know what I mean? Like to do it over again, or just to relive it because I was so happy?
You take it where you want.
Because I would take it two directions. One, the day I got engaged was the happiest day of my entire life. So I'd love to relive that joy. But for anyone out there looking to get engaged, stand by. It's amazing. You can't prepare for it. I'm a control freak. I wanted to be able to mentally prepare for it. You're not going to prepare for it. But I wish I could go back, honestly, and just like tap myself on the shoulder before, or probably like right after Miss California. Like right after I walked off the stage, I got runner-up, and I like truly was like dumbfounded, like so perplexed. Like I hadn't worked for anything in my entire life. Probably not even, I worked really hard at the Naval Academy, obviously, to graduate, but this was like different, like this was so out of your control. And I wish I could just tap myself on the shoulder and be like, everything happens for a reason. Like, stand by. Like, this is not the end of a chapter. This is really like opening a new one. But it took me several months to like kind of move past that loss. It felt like a breakup. Like I felt like Miss USA had broken up with me because I aged out and I couldn't move forward, and like the dream was gone, right? Like that was it. Like I couldn't do anything more. Couldn't compete again. But COVID happened that year, and I ended up getting engaged, and there were so many policies still in place about how you couldn't be married and be in Miss USA. And I was able to really like move on in my life. And I actually remember talking to you right after the competition because I was still like, I feel like I had gotten dumped. I was like, wait, what do you mean I didn't win? Like I was so upset. And you said, there are a lot of amazing titles that you could achieve, but the best title you'll ever have is wife, and the next greatest is mom. And so you're like you haven't even like tapped into the chapters that are ahead. So that hadn't happened for me yet. Like I wasn't engaged, I wasn't married, but like that really helped open my eyes to like what was coming. So I wish I could just like remind myself, like, brace for impact. There's still so much ahead. Like this wasn't a loss, this was a growth. But in that moment, it's so hard when you're in your ball gown and your full face of makeup. You're like, what just happened? Like I didn't win. I can't achieve this dream, this goal. And it takes a while for you to realize like, why it had to happen.
And Troy, she got super close. She was first runner-up.
Yeah, I always wondered why y'all do that, because then you have two first place people.
Right. It's so confusing.
You have the winner, who's obviously first, and then you have the first runner-up. Yeah. It doesn't work that way in the Olympics, though. It's like you got the gold,
You're
and you got the
second.
first runner-up to gold. No, it's just silver. So,
True.
Right.
so I think it's kind of a cool twist on things. So it's like, so you didn't win. Nobody was first.
Runner.
So
Right.
it's kind of
First loser. Yeah.
first loser. But to get to that point, though, they make a big deal about the first runner-up, though. They do a really good job in that world of...
They delay it too. Like,
Yeah, I mean, obviously the winner's going to get all the accolades and that kind of stuff, but they do have it to where it's like, hey, look, we do honor these other people that came close. And then if you weren't close, well, then you don't even get on stage. You just, no.
they also delay results. So if you have your final two standing there together, they're like, and first runner up, remember, if the winner can for some reason not uphold her, title throughout the year,
Right.
the first runner up will take her place. So they do this whole like dramatic da-da-da-da-da, and then announce.
Yeah, I think that helps, though, because you have a chance to win. But you don't know if you're going to win. And
Right.
they have that delay, so you can kind of experience that.
Suspense.
So but it kind of makes it to where it's agonizing if you don't win, but it's
Oh, yeah.
more, it's
Oh, yeah.
more like, wow, when I do win kind of thing. But I mean, what else are you going to do? I mean, they're at the end. Everyone's wondering, do you rip the Band-Aid out? No, they just like, okay, let's wait a little longer. But it does give you some time to, what if, and you're going back and forth. And you're never going to have that. Rarely you're going to have that experience again in pageantry. It always amazes me of girls that don't win. They come back year after year after year. And there's been a few that I'm sure came real close. And the next year they're like 8th. And like, what the, and they're like totally
Right.
dumbfounded. And then
Right.
there's others that just kind of, okay, well, I was top 10, then I got
And you
third,
move
and then all of a sudden you win, and you're like, oh. And then I think everyone else sees it, and they're, oh, well, that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
What I've learned in the pageant world is it's never the same. People do not win based on you do this, this, and this, you get it. It's a very unique goal to have. It's not a replicable goal to have.
Right.
Like if you want to get into the Naval Academy, you pretty much, okay, I've got to do this, this, and this. And if I do this,
Right.
I'm going to get in. Okay. Well, I can do this, this, and this. So that doesn't mean I'm going to win in the pageant world. Just like in the Olympics, I can do exactly what my dad did and I'm going to make it. No, there's no guarantee.
Right.
So it's difficult that way.
It
So-
is so hard.
And she was brilliant. Like, she did everything she possibly could do. I watched the competition. She was fabulous on stage.
Thank you.
And the thing that happens in pageantry is that there's more than one person deserving of the win because it's all subjective in grading. And so,
Subjective. Right.
yeah, subjective. So the judging panel is like, they're determining what happens here, but there's more than one person deserving. And so at the end of the day,
Well, I bet
Right.
I bet there's a rare occasion where there's those pageants where one person just outshines everyone, but I think that would be rare,
it's
right?
rare. Yeah.
Right.
Most of the time, there's
Especially-
probably 2 or 3 that are like, wow, how do we, this one I like for this reason, this one I like for this reason, and you got to pick one.
Yeah, especially at the state and national level and she was competing in California. So let's do a little backstory. Like, when did you and I first start working together, and what was your history in pageantry before that?
Yeah, I did Miss Ohio USA for 3 years, so 3 times. And I got into it completely like on a whim. I just I was stationed in Ohio. I wanted to make friends in Ohio. No previous pageant experience. But the first year I competed, I made the top 15, and I was like, okay, that was cool. Bye. But then people in the military really encouraged me. They're like, no, you should really keep doing this. We don't see a lot of military/naval officers at all doing Miss Ohio USA or Miss USA. So I kept doing it for that because I realized how rare it was. And then I received orders to California. So I was going to hang up the hat. I was like, that's it. I think my 3rd year, I was top 5 in Miss Ohio. So I always kind of moved up a little bit. And I was like, I need to move on with my life. Then my then boyfriend, now husband, he was like, don't you have one more year of eligibility? And I was like, yeah, but, like it's time, like it's so much work, it's so much money. It's like I just need to like, move on with my life and on to this next chapter. And he was like, I think you should do it one more time. And I was like, really? And so I ended up like looking up Miss California USA. It was a couple months after I moved out to Los Angeles. And so I had started prepping in Ohio before I ever moved. That's when I connected with Heather for the first time. I started training, doing my own personal training, but that was kind of it. It was like, this is my last hurrah. I'm aging out. I'm going into California. The amount of people who laughed at me, they were like, oh, like you competed in Ohio, like that's cute. Miss California, like that's the big one, right? Like that in Texas, like or New York. Those are the three big ones. It's so hard. Women out there, they're actresses, they're models, they're Wilhelmina, like they're huge. And you're gonna come here and you think you can win. And I was kind of like, I just like believed in my abilities because this wasn't about me. I was like, if I win Miss California, I would be the first ever naval officer to go to Miss USA. Actually, the first ever person in the Navy to go to Miss USA. Like, I still like believe that that's a possibility. And I wanted to represent that, kind of spearhead that movement. So I think the fact that it wasn't about Kellie Hall doing this and like achieving this goal, like it was a much bigger mission, like that definitely helped. But yeah, Miss California, I mean, it was like 4 or 5 days long. There were like banquets and fashion runway shows and photo shoots. And I mean, I could not have imagined not being mentally prepared walking into that because it was a lot to compete in Miss Ohio. And that was like a day and a half. Coming to Miss California was so overwhelming. A 5-day event of, you're being watched the entire time. Like it was definitely an experience for sure. But, to circle back to what y'all are already talking about, like the winners and the runner-ups, I think that that's why I kind of took that runner-up title and literally ran with it. Because the weeks following, I was like, that's still an accomplishment. Like, no, I didn't achieve the crown. I didn't go to Miss USA. But I worked my butt off and I was runner-up. And I'm still going to give myself a pat on the back for it and kind of like maximize this window I have where people are watching me. So many people were like, what is she going to do now? Like, what's next for her? And you feel a little bit of that pressure. So I was like, I don't need to win Miss USA. Like, I don't need this title. Like, I'm going to create this path myself. And I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to start speaking in front of women and kind of do all of this on my own. Like I think so many of us think we need a platform to like launch us into those projects. But I was like, no, like that was still an accomplishment of mine. I'm going to take with me. And if anything, it's more relatable because more people lose than win. So if anything, some people reach out to me like, thank you. Like you make me realize like I can still go out and accomplish things without having won that title or that medal or that crown or that placement. You know what I mean?
So your husband was in the Navy as well?
No,
He
not? Is not in the Navy. He's a civilian. I met him when I was in Ohio.
Okay, so was he part of a fraternity in college?
He was.
So there you go.
Yes.
He's like, okay, I got this figured out. She's going to win, and I'm going to brag to all my fraternity, but I'm married to Miss California. That's what he's going to.
He
that
wanted
was
to be
plan.
Mr. California, like
That's
100%.
right.
That's what he wanted to be.
Yeah. He had his own goal in mind. Yeah, bragging rights. So that's what I was thinking about. Oh, I see how that works. But juggling, so the question I have is juggling that as well as being in the military cannot be easy.
Right.
How does that work? When I was in the military, it was, now it's changed. Obviously, it's been how many years? Gosh, I can't remember. It's been a while since I've been in, so it might have changed now. But it was kind of frowned upon if you did things outside the military.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you juggle that during that time period? Because as Heather will tell me over and over and over, it's like she doesn't think I get it. It's like, you don't understand how much is involved in this.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of time, a lot of effort, that kind of stuff. Okay, yeah, but the military requires you a lot of time. I mean, you give up your freedom. Mm-hmm. That's what people don't understand. It's like they literally own you 24/7. Like they could call you up at midnight and say, hey, we need you to come here. And you can't just say, yeah, I'll be there at 7. I'm going to go back to bed. You have to go. So how do you do that? How do you juggle that?
Yeah, I get this question all the time. And I'd say like first and foremost, and you can relate to this. before you dive into any personal project, passion, anything that's going to take up time, right? Especially time away from the military, you have to already have that sustained superior performance in the military. So leading up to me competing at Miss Ohio, this was 2016, I think. And then 2017 and 2018, I was already like, developed a really good reputation, really good relationship with my superiors, worked really, really hard at work. I had good fit reps. Like I had already proven myself kind of in my role in the Navy, and I was reliable. And I think I had shown that I was already committed, right? So a lot of people, they want to like join the Navy. Oh, but I also want to be an entrepreneur. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. Like you need to prove to your chain of command and to like, everyone around you, the Navy's first. That's the way it's continued to be for me. Like you want to have sustained superior performance, but also your role in the military comes first. And for a lot of people, it's same like being a mom, like that role comes first, like you have to get your footing there before you can dive into all of these things. So I think, that's number one. Number two is communication and support from your chain of command. I had to get permission from my commanding officer to compete in my first pageant. And I didn't want to. I wanted to keep it a secret. LOL, that would have never happened. But I wanted to keep it a secret just because I truly wanted to make friends, right? But then this whole thing became so much bigger than me. Like competing in a pageant, this wasn't about Kellie. Like this was about what it meant to the military and women in the military and seeing that opportunity. So when I asked permission, my commanding officer was like, I think this is great. I think this is a great opportunity. We need to showcase that women can do both, that, women can be in the military and be feminine and, explore other opportunities. I think you should do it. And I was like, really? Like, I couldn't believe that she supported it. Not every commanding officer is going to support it, right? Depending on what role you're in, what mission that you have. But I was, really lucky to be working. I just gotten attached to a recruiting command. So they were like, yeah, go do it. We think this is really great for Navy recruiting. And then third is, learning how to kind of balance and manage that time. So I was talking to Heather like on my lunch breaks, right? I'd be like, I have a 30-minute window on my lunch break. Like, I'll talk to you here. I remember taking a session with you in the car. Like every time you could make it happen, right? Like I was in the parking lot talking to my mental management coach. I was squeezing my workouts at 5 a.m. Because time is not your own. And so I had to figure out a path where I could fit it in and make it a priority. And I think it all comes down to prioritization. So people think it's so impossible. And people on social media to this day, they troll me. They say you're not a real naval officer. What do you do for our country? And I sit back and I'm like, number one, you don't see my fit reps. You don't write my evaluations. Like, you have no idea what I do. And my chain of command supports me. My boss supports me. She supports my social media influence and all the passions I take on. But third, they don't see those early morning workouts. They don't see the way I prioritize my time. They don't see the fact that, I'm up late pushing out a podcast at 11 p.m., and my sweet husband supports me. He's like, are you going to go to bed? And I'm like, I have to push out my podcast. Like, those are the things I do that people don't see. And I can talk about it till I'm blue in the face, but it really comes with like, it is possible if it matters to you. And this mattered to me. So again, like I keep moving up in my military career because that's always number one for me. That's what's putting food on the table. But that's also like what is a priority, right? Like being a naval officer will always come first, taking care of my sailors, making sure that, again, the mission is being held. But then everything else, like I've learned to kind of balance. But the communication, that support from your chain of command is so important.
So are we looking at long-term Navy? Like when you first got in, there's two types of people that I've seen, especially when you go to an academy. Because you go to the academy, you're pretty much going there for, a strenuous 4-year period, right? You graduate, you got a 5-year commitment, and where it is the first 2 years, just don't do anything stupid. You're going to get promoted, and then, okay, the real work starts. And then after that, 5 years is up, you're like, yeah, maybe I go, maybe I stay. But I think a lot of people think, okay, this is going to be a career long-term, like 20 plus years. Was that your goal, 20 plus years? Or you're like, I want to go in, I want to experience this, at least do this amount, but then I'll rethink it after this amount of time. what was your initial
thought process.
your thought process as far as, okay, I'm going to go for the Naval Academy, because that's not something people just wake up and say, I just want to do this. A lot of time and thinking.
That was exactly it. I was looking at different colleges and I was getting recruited to run track, and I got recruited to run track at the Naval Academy. And it dawned on me one day when I was doing my tour at the Naval Academy with the cross country team. The captain at the time, senior, she got recruited to go to Duke, and then she also got recruited to go to the Naval Academy. And she looked at me and she said, I knew kind of what my life would look like had I gone to Duke, had I gone to like a fun college and had that experience. I was familiar with that. I had no idea what my life would look like if I went to the Naval Academy. She's like, so I knew I'd always look back on my life and wonder, what if? Like, what if I had gone there? What if I became a naval officer? What if I deployed? What if I did all of those things? Like, I had no idea, which means I had to do it. I knew I'd always look back and wonder that. And so I was sitting there as a 17-year-old, eating my grilled cheese. I was like, dang it, I'm going to have to go to the Naval Academy, because it's exactly what I'm going to think. Like, I'm going to look back and wonder, like, what if I'd gone to the Naval Academy?
You mean you didn't think, let me jump in right quick. You didn't think, gee, I wonder what the track looks like on the ships. You run a track. How big is that track, huh? I'm running the 20-inch dash. I mean, it's not like they got much room out there on the ships. I'm thinking, okay, you're going to run track in the Naval Academy. The average person got to be thinking, they have track at the Naval Academy? I'm pretty sure the average person thinks that. Like in rifle shooting, right? People automatically, like if you go to West Point, they go, oh, that makes sense. You go in the Army, they would have a rifle team. But the Naval Academy also has a rifle program. And they're like, really? They have a rifle team? Yeah, so does Air Force. So does Coast Guard. They all have a rifle program. Right. But people they don't associate that. So I would think, running and Navy doesn't quite fit. And I just want to jump in before I forgot. Did you get that weird look? Oh, yeah, I'm going to Navy because I want to run track. They're like, what?
Not really, because it's a 4-year college, that you walk into the Naval Academy, it looks like any other university. So,
no,
especially
it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It's a lot nicer than most other universities.
I mean, it is a lot nicer. I'm trying to be humble, but
yes, I've been there.
It's a lot
nicer
than
nice.
Most 4-year colleges. But also, I'm from the DC area originally. So applying to the Naval Academy is almost like applying to a state school. Not everyone gets into it because it's so hard to get into, but it's pretty routine for a lot of people in our area that, Maryland, DC, Virginia area to know or be interested in the Naval Academy. So, that wasn't necessarily the case when I was stationed in Ohio. People were like, oh, you went to the Naval Academy? What's that? When did you enlist? And I was like, it's not really what it is, but that's okay. So I've had to explain it to a lot of people, but I knew it was a normal 4-year college, with varsity track programs, football team, all of that. So to kind of circle back to your original question, I've just kind of always taken everything, by chapter, right? So I was like, I'm going to go to the Naval Academy because this is something I know I won't regret. And once I get through it, it's going to be challenging, but I'm going to maximize my potential in every way. Once I graduate from it, I'm going to be like, wow, I just did that. And I apply that philosophy to everything, right? So even with pageants, the opportunity came. And I was like, I think if I don't apply for this and do it, I'll probably look back and be like, I wonder what would have happened had I done Miss Ohio USA, Miss California USA. And even now in my career, these different opportunities keep presenting themselves. I moved to Chicago with 5 weeks notice because they nominated me for the billet that I'm currently in. And they were like, hey, you want to go to Chicago and do XYZ? And I was like, huh? But it was such an honor to be nominated for this. And it was one of those situations again, where it's if I don't take this really hard, demanding, challenging role, I'll probably look back and wonder what if. So I assess it year by year on it with my career. It's not just about me now, it's also my family. And I think bottom line, when you have support, but you truly are fulfilled by what you're doing, that it's going to take you really far. So right now, I think we want to stay in. Things are going well for me. Sometimes I'll peek at other opportunities. I'll be like, oh, Google, that sounds cool. Amazon or marketing. People are like, why are you not doing marketing full time? But it's that feeling I get, being in the military. It's so fulfilling. It's truly something, it's so cliche, but it's truly something bigger than you. Like, it's not about Kelly. It's about the people that you're impacting, and then like truly like serving your country. There's a reason why there's so many different jobs in the Navy, because they need all kinds of people. So I still feel like I have a job here and a role in the military to like make a bigger impact.
So what's the biggest challenge you've had to overcome?
Working with you.
Working with Heather Sumlin was really, really hard.
That's because she hasn't worked with you, and then that would be her biggest challenge.
God, there's been so many challenges, Heather. Like, as you know, it's been really tough kind of forging my own path. As Troy alluded to, like, you don't do things outside of the military. Like, that is not a popular opinion. You aren't different. Like, you don't act differently. You don't lead differently. I have been different. The day that I stepped into the Naval Academy, I was different. I was shorter, wore makeup, was bubbly, was feminine. Along the way, people have always been trying to change who I am because it's too different. And then that also applied to the career path I chose and competing in pageants. Nope. Like, you shouldn't do that. People are going to judge you. People are going to know you as like that naval officer that competed, or, hey, you're that naval officer that's also an influencer. But when you feel called to be different and you truly like want to explore the side of yourself by being true to your abilities, there's so much more reward that comes from like being able to balance both in the right way and like knowing your intention. So I'm challenged. Honestly, I'm challenged daily. Even now, like, I'm 8.5 years in my career, but all those little things along the way have been able to prep me for something like big that's going to happen. Like, I feel like something really, really big is around the corner for me. And it's continuing to help like shatter those stereotypes in the military. So I think that like I was placed here for a reason, and I need to remember that. But I think that that's probably been the hardest thing, is like just kind of like fighting that narrative and fighting against the haters and, saying like, no, like, shush, like, this isn't what we do in the Navy. Right. But it's been so rewarding to now be where I'm at and stay true to myself.
So let's talk a minute about your podcast, because you started it during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I remember that conversation and brainstorm that we had beforehand. So kind of tell us where it started and where it is now.
Yeah. Heather, my girl, helped me. I remember like first of all, you like instilled so much belief in myself, to be honest. Like, through like, it's not just about the text, it's not just about the the procedures you guys have in place for winning in mind. It truly is like, when you believe in yourself, like, the world is your oyster, right? So you are like, hey, Kelly, it's so much about like pageantry is like celebrating what you're already doing, like not reinventing yourself. And I was speaking to like college students and Girl Scouts, and I was doing all these speaking events for like 2 years probably. And so after, and I was hoping Miss USA would help launch that, right? I was like, oh, I'm going to be a national speaker. I'm going to go on tour, and I'm going to, talk all about like overcoming challenges and obstacles and celebrating the power within. Then the pandemic happened, and then I didn't win, right? So I was like, this is still in my control. And you were like, you should just like start a podcast. Why not? And I was like, you're right. So we sat down and we kept thinking about the angles, and we came up with Misunderstood as my podcast name. I literally have a journal with like all of our like ideas of branding. It's so funny. I was reading through them last night. It was like, Congenial Kelly, because I like gone Miss Congeniality for 3 years, and then it was like Standing Tall with Kellie Hall. Those kill me. Like, Austin was like, you should have picked that. It's hilarious. But then you were like, you're so like misunderstood. Everything that you do is so misunderstood. And you were like, wait a second, like, that's who you are. Like, you never won a Miss USA title, but you're the queen of being misunderstood. And I was like, we have something here. So my podcast started out and still is kind of like diving into all things misunderstood, all topics, marriage, dating, life in the Navy, balancing your passions, doing both. Like, it's such a broad thing, but I really kind of narrow it on what's going on in my life at the time. So I really tune into the struggles that not only that I have had, but what I'm having right now. Because I find that super relatable for my audience and kind of giving them like tangible steps and things to work on when they're going through these seasons that are really difficult.
Cool.
Sweet. I like the idea. I keep thinking as she's talking, as far as when you have a challenge or you're trying to set a goal, because people ask, well, what separates the people who win from people who don't? And one of the things that you're hitting on this morning is something no one has hit on really in the past podcasts we had, and that is, if I don't do this, will I regret it? You know, actually looking at it, not looking at, okay, how hard this is going to be. It's a way forward thinking. You're going back, okay, if I'm 60 and I look back, am I going to go, yeah, I settled for this when I should have done this? And when you don't settle and you go for the one that's not guaranteed, because even though you know the steps you got to do in certain areas, it's not easy to do. And if I fail, what's going to happen? But that's part of the journey. You know, that's what separates those. Not everyone's going to win. Well, not everyone's going to make it to this or that or the other. So I think that's a really good point that you made, is like, am I going to regret this? I know what this is like or what this is going to be like, but I don't know what this is going to be like. I'm going to go do that.
I feel like Kellie doesn't have a lot of regrets. I feel like Kellie just does it. Like, if she wants to do it, she just finds a way.
There you go. You already have 2 books now. You've got Standing Tall with Kellie Hall. That's a first book.
Love that.
And then you have no regret, Kellie. There you go.
So you're Standing Tall with Kellie Hall. You just go back to your journal and you take the little nuggets and create. Yeah.
I know. I'm like, this is a book like waiting to happen. Like, I'm so happy I journaled all those things through pageantry. It's crazy.
So what's your favorite? Okay, so speaking of working with mental management and preparing for competition, what's your favorite takeaway that you learned, whether it's a principle or something that you learned or a product? What was your favorite takeaway?
Okay, so I would say like number one, this is probably one of the most valuable things that I learned with you. And you know, I have, again, so many notes in here. Visualization for me, you and I talked through like, okay, like you are arriving in Miss California. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Okay, it's the final competition. Like you have already done blank, blank, blank. Like kind of walking through those steps. Because I'd say like the days leading into the competition, like I was so at peace. I've been working with you for like 6 months. There was nothing we had not talked about. There was nothing I hadn't tapped into. There was nothing I hadn't reflected on. There was no story that I hadn't, you know, regurgitated with you that was powerful. Like I watched through my notes with you, like this kind of brain dumping, like this is who I am. And like, these are my experiences. And we like cultivated this whole path, this whole brand of like, these are the 3 things you're going to bring to your competition. Like never forget those 3 things. And in bold letters, I have happy place. And you're like, always tap into your happy place. And so you're like, what is your happy place? And so I remember looking back, and one of the things was like, I'm an innovative leader. And I had like little bullet points under like what made me an innovative leader, whether it was competing in a pageant or being a speaker at the National Girl Scouts Convention, like doing all these things that were different. And so like I would tap into that happy place, right? Like every single time, like I felt those butterflies coming up, or maybe I was about to answer my onstage question. So like that visualization leading up to it and like having practiced those thoughts was so powerful. But I'll just say, like, quick story. I was so calm at finals, so calm. Like there was nothing I would have changed about my interview, about my preliminary performance, deep breaths. I was so present, right? Looking back on, I was like, yep, like perfect. 5 stars. Would not have changed a thing. And it wasn't cockiness. It was absolutely confidence in my abilities. So finals come, I get called into the top 15. We're doing our swimsuit performance. And again, I was like, I feel good about my body. I feel good about my walk. I feel good about everything. Like I practiced, I rehearsed it. Take a deep breath, go. I execute my onstage walk. I get pulled to the side, and the director is like, are you okay? And I'm like, what do you mean, am I okay? I'm doing great. Like, I'm in Miss California. I'm about to get called to the top 5. Like, let's go. She goes, okay, so you don't know. And I'm like, what do I not know? She's like, your swimsuit top malfunctioned on stage. And I was like, what? And they had us wearing these like huge butterfly wings, like Victoria's Secret style for finals. So you have to raise your arms up. So when I raised my arms up, my swimsuit literally popped out. So my chest was hanging out in front of like thousands of people. And I had no idea. I was in my moment, flying. And she's like, so your chest came out on stage and we saw everything. And my brain was like, okay, like, how am I going to react to it, right? As I practiced with you, like, how am I going to react to this moment? Like, I'd freak out, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened. How's this going to affect me? And I said, is this going to disqualify me? And she said, no, absolutely not. And I was like, okay. I just kept going and I didn't let it affect me whatsoever. And I was like, truly, like, unless it's going to pull me out of the competition, like, I have to keep going. I have a top 5 to get into. I have a final answer or a final question. I have a ball gown to walk in. Like, you have to compartmentalize and keep going. And so, like, I truly think, like, had I not had all of that practice, the way that you helped me, I would not have overcome it in the way. And after the competition, days later, people were like, I would have started bawling. I would have started crying. I would have panicked. I would have fell to my knees. Like, I would have been so humiliated. And I was like, what can you do? You cannot control that. There's so many things that are going to come your way and so many obstacles. Like, you have to figure out, like, okay, how am I going to react to this? How am I going to choose to react to the situation? And then move on. And then all your prep and practice will just kick in. And that's exactly what happened to me. Because you and I talked, you were like, there's going to be something, Kellie. There is going to be something. If it doesn't happen the first day, it might happen the second day. It might happen the moment before you walk on stage in heels. It's going to happen. And you have to choose how you react to it. I apply that same concept to my life every single day in the Navy. I'm like, okay, how am I going to choose to react to this situation? So that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but there were so many principles that I use throughout the competition, but also use every day now.
So she learned to respond and not react.
Respond
she
and
was
not react.
responding.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't think you can top that.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. Also, I have never shared that story. Never shared that story. Well, luckily, when the video came out, they like edited my performance. So unfortunately, my swimsuit performance is like 10 seconds long. But yeah, it didn't make the internet, which is good. So.
Yeah, it wasn't on the webcast or anything, which is good. But I wanted to say too that some of the things that you're talking about are things that we work together because we worked on branding and interview as well as mental management. And so for those who are following us and follow the podcast and don't know, so I do mental coaching and then I also do interview prep. And so with Kellie, we did both. And so I just wanted to qualify that because some of the things you're talking about, we worked a lot on her stories and a lot on her brand and like what does she bring to the table that separates her from others. And that's part of the secret sauce that we got to talk about.
Heather, I didn't even know I had a brand. It's insane. Like now people are like, oh, that's so your brand. Like it's very like normal. I'm like, oh yeah, I have a brand. In 2019, I think that's when we started working together. Yeah, 2019. I was like, oh, I know like the qualities that make Kellie like going about life. I had no idea. Like I already had a brand and you are the one that pointed that out to me. So you have no idea like the impact you made in the long run. I think people are like, oh, I like to do this. I like to do this. Like, this is a quality about me. And you're like, honey, that's a brand. That's what you're already doing. You don't need to reinvent yourself just because you're competing in this, or you want to start a social media platform, or you want to be an influencer. Like, start speaking to the truth of like who you are. No one is you. You know what I mean? Like, we all, like, just because someone is a pageant competitor doesn't mean she does it the same way I do it. I have a different interpretation of like what that means. So yes, you're a star. It's crazy. I've implemented all of those things to exactly like what I do now.
Yeah, she's definitely overcome the challenge of working with you.
Yeah, she's overcome that for sure. Yes. I'm still working on overcoming my challenge of working with you, but it's okay.
That's a lifelong challenge.
Yeah, we're still working on that. So here's what we want to do for our Patreon members. If you are not a Patreon member yet, I want you to go ahead and sign up for our Patreon membership, because silver and gold level members will get more details with Kellie. We're going to do a deep dive into what was it that she was thinking about before each phase of competition. How did she handle some of the struggles, maybe in the Naval Academy or even after her journey for Miss USA had ended. So we're going to go into more details with her. So I hope you'll join our Patreon membership. If you like this podcast, please hit that like button. Thank you so much, Kellie, for joining us today. We are just delighted. Hopefully Troy enjoyed this interview as much as I did.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much.
You're welcome.